welcome to the big local panel discussion.
Yeah! Panel discussion!
I am Ten Fingers. I also go by Tennille Clerk. And this is famous artist Sebastian Berto.
Oh yeah, welcome everybody out there on the internet.
This is the very first episode in a series of 4 live streams being presented as part of the Melbourne Fringe Festival. The idea behind it is to showcase local Victorian artists that are making art that engages the community in climate action in innovative ways. Tonight we have a panel discussion, and then on the 7th we have short films. On the 10th, we have a comedy night starring comedy legend Rod Quantock and other local comedians. And then on the 14th, we have a live art extravaganza full of completely rubbish art.
It's going to be absolutely rubbish.
Completely rubbish. So we just wanted to let everyone know that this is a very DIY setup and that Sebastian is doing all of the tech as we go live to you. We have many screens. We have a green screen. We have lights. We're basically like community television here.
Yeah.
And we're just, if everyone could just say a little prayer to the NBN gods that and the tech deities that everything works.
Please, Tech Gaia.
That would be great. Now, there is closed captions. So if you're watching on Twitch, you just need to select the closed captions and they will pop up. They are an automated service, so they are, fingers crossed, they are as accurate as possible. If you are watching this later on YouTube, there should also be closed captions for you.
Yep. We'll try and make sure that they're more accurate.
Yeah, we're going to fix them up, any mistakes. And you can participate in the chat. I can see heaps of people already in there. Hello, Hunter. Hello, Carly Fern. Hello, Sea Snacks. Hello, Anna Catherine. Hello, Riddle Hacks. Hello, Magic Stephen. Hello, Chesswig 5000. For anyone who's watching and they're not participating in the chat, they don't know how, you just have to create a little Twitch account. It's really easy. You just have to sign up. You have to think of a catchy username and a password.
A catchy password.
A catchy password. A secret catchy password. Even my mum has Twitch. So if Shazza55 can do it, you can too.
Yeah. So there.
But if you are struggling, you can email me. And that should have come to you in the tech help as part of your Melbourne Fringe ticket registration. We're here for you. So we're about to cross live to Councillor Gabrielle De Vietri and the panelists, and we're going to be talking about what role can art play in climate action. So as the panelists are chatting, you can talk in the chat. They can't see what you're saying, so you can talk behind their backs. But I will, any questions that you have towards the end of the panel, there will be time for all of you to ask the panelists questions. So if you're thinking of questions as you go, you can type them in the chat and I'll make note of them. Is there anything else we should mention, Sebi?
I don't know.
Well, we're really stoked to be able to present this to you all and really thankful that you've all, so many people here already participating in the chat. It's really exciting. This is something that I've been working on, this expo, for the past few months as part of my artists in residence as a community artist at the city of Yarra. And I really wanted to be able to inspire more people to create art about climate action. So thanks for coming along. All right, well, I think without further ado, we should cross live to the panelists.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. You unmuted them all?
I'm going to... are you unmuted, Gabrielle?
Good evening, everyone.
Yay.
Hello. I'll take it away from here.
Thank you.
Excellent, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Gabrielle de Vietri. I'm the Mayor of Yarra and a former artist. To start off with, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and the true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We acknowledge their creative spirit, Bunjil, their ancestors and their elders. We recognise the strength and resilience of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, who have never ceded sovereignty and who retain their strong connection to family, clan and country, despite the impacts of European invasion. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. And we recognise with gratitude in particular the presence of Claire G. Coleman on our panel tonight. I'd like to recognise the various traditional lands where each of us on the panel are, and in the audience are living, working, sharing our stories from, and pay respect to elders from all nations here tonight and to their elders past, present and future. I'm hoping that you can hear me because my internet looks like it's being patchy, so feel free to jump in to Neil and Sebastian if you need me to turn my camera off and be extra charismatic with my voice.
It's looking good.
But in the meantime, I will encourage everyone watching now to join in the conversation in the chat function. Tell us who you are, tell us the country you're joining us from. As was mentioned, we can't see it, but all the other audience members watching along with you will be able to see it. I'll just do a quick check-in, Sebastian and to Neil, if everything's going smoothly on your end, on the receiving end.
Yes, indeed. Everything is A-OK.
Oh no.
Or it was, but
We've lost the mayor.
somehow... Oh, here we go.
We spoke too soon.
There you go, you're back.
I'm back. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with my Zoom, but it keeps cutting out, but I am back. So do jump in and let me know if I need to turn my video off. But in anticipation of everything going well from now on, I will say welcome to the Big Local Arts and Climate Expo. This event is a series of live streams which will showcase diverse local artists creating work designed to engage the community in discussion of...
Oh no, maybe we're gonna have to turn your camera off, Gabrielle. Look, it wouldn't be a good Zoom without some technical difficulties.
Let's see. Gabrielle is back.
Sebi, make some music while we're in the waiting room for
Okay.
Gabrielle.
I'm so sorry that my Zoom keeps shutting down, but I'm going to join now with just audio.
Okay, cool. No probs.
All right, let's hope. Everyone, fingers crossed. So as I was saying, it's designed to engage the community in a discussion about an action on the climate emergency. This live stream series aims to increase the awareness of the role of art in climate action, provide a platform for local artists to showcase their climate-focused work, and provide an opportunity to bring artists and other people in our community together so that we can expand our collective understanding of what climate action looks like or might be. This live stream has been curated by the local artist Tennille Clerk, who introduced this session, and it's part of her 6-month artist in residency with the Yarra Council. We're really, really proud to have provided this 6-month opportunity for an artist to engage deeply with the workings of our sustainability unit and other departments in council. Tonight's panel discussion focuses on the role of art in responding to the climate emergency. with 3 more live stream events over the next couple of weeks, including, as you heard earlier, a short film night, a comedy night, and a live art showcase. Now, Tennille and Sebastian can say it's rubbish, but I feel like that's casting aspersions where I have no expertise. So I will just say it's a live art showcase. The discussion tonight will run for about an hour and a half, and it will include questions from you in the audience, and it will be available after the fact on YouTube. So to the discussion now. Art has been used as a vehicle for climate and environmental action for decades before us. Think performative interventions to highlight or sever the ties between big oil and the arts. Think melting icebergs in town squares. Think of reframing and representing the frightful data of our environmental decline. Bringing art and climate together is more than designing a poster, although it certainly can be that too. So how can artists today continue to engage the public in what is an increasingly urgent, politicized, and humanitarian environmental crisis? Tonight, we'll hear from 3 panelists whose practices are expansive, evocative, and that sometimes dreaded and derided word by artists, effective. So let's begin by introducing tonight's panelists. Claire G. Coleman, give us a wave. I'm not sure if our audience can see multiple screens, but give us a wave anyway. Claire is a Noongar woman born in Whadjuk Noongar Boodjar, also known as Perth. Away from her ancestral country, she has lived most of her life in Victoria, and most of that in and around Narrm. She writes fiction, essays, poetry, and art criticism. She has published 3 books, Terra Nullius, The Old Lie, and Lies, Damn Lies. Lies, Damn Lies, Claire's first non-fiction book, unpacking the effects of the history of Australia's colonisation, was released only just recently on the 1st of September 2021. Congratulations, Claire, and welcome to this panel. Jen is a Narrm-based artist researcher, facilitator and educator of Canadian Red River Métis-Scottish descent from Treaty 6 territory. Give us a wave, Jen. Her practice research is in the field of contemporary environmental art and environmental communication, and it's centered around cultural responses to climate change, or as she calls it, everything change, specifically the role of artists and creative inquiry. Jen has been a core artist for the Arts House 5-year Refuge project. She co-designed and facilitated the Resilience Creativity Lab, and is also the director of Fair Share Fair and co-founder of the Fawkner Commons. Welcome. And finally, Matt Wicking is an artist, activist, and facilitator. Hello, hello. Matt's art practice includes storytelling, poetry, and music. His facilitation work includes working with progressive groups to amplify their message. Matt has also worked as the lead facilitator of the Centre for Sustainability Leadership Fellowship Program, Greenie in Residence at Arts House, Communications Advisor at the Bureau of Meteorology, Environmental Educator with Monash Sustainable Development Institute, and many years as a sustainability consultant, and most recently co-facilitator of Council's Community Skills for Climate Action Program. So from the comfort of your couch, give our speakers a huge round of applause. Woo! And welcome. So I'll start by asking a series of questions and ask if the panelists can try and illustrate their responses with either examples of their own work or examples of other artists' work that you know that might serve to illustrate your answers. And I'll start with a question which is pretty broad, brings the tone down a bit, unfortunately. So we're in the midst of a pandemic, there's no denying that. The likelihood of containing devastating climate change to 1.5 degrees is becoming increasingly slim. Funding is tougher than ever. Why make art now? I'll throw that one open to Claire.
Well, my first thought about that question is when Bob Marley was shot, it was reported to have said when he walked up on stage the next day, the people trying to make the world a worse place aren't having a day off. Why should I? Like, it doesn't matter how bad things get. If we kind of don't make art as a form of resistance, the quote bad guys will win. We are artists, and kind of our tool of resistance is our art. And the climate vandals are not stopping just because the world's getting worse, and they're not going to stop if we start winning. If we start destroying their businesses, they're not going to stop then. So why should we? Why should we make life easy for them now? My writing is always about resistance against the kind of lies in our that drive our culture. And I don't really specifically write about climate much, though I have worked on climate projects, particularly with Jen. But there's kind of fighting is what we have to do, and fighting is what we should do. And so my writing is always about resistance, and I don't know how to do anything else anyway. So the question really shouldn't be why make art in this crisis. The question should be why should we ever stop, I guess.
Excellent provocation. Absolutely. I think that's a much more pertinent question. I think many artists who feel compelled to make art feel the same. Matt.
Sure. Thanks, Gabrielle. And it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me along, and lovely to see you, Claire and Jen. It's such a good question. And similar to Claire, I feel like the first thing that comes to my mind is something like why not make art? I feel like at the heart of the question almost is a doubtfulness or an uncertainty of art's value, that we would even ask this question. But I think it's a great one because we do ask it. I think artists ask it of ourselves. We question that we're spending our time on the right stuff when there's critical, activist work to do, or whatever it is, building solar panels or whatever the work that you might think might be more critical. But recently I've been thinking about what art is, and my sense is that we've got a bit of in our modern world, we've got some weird ideas about what art is. I think we think that it's something that professional artists do and no one else should touch. I think we think that it's some sort of weird specialization that only has a certain limited number of uses. Whereas my sense of what art is, what the culture is that forms like story, song, visual arts, metaphor, these things were forged at the meeting point of the pretty much infinite universe around us and our beautiful but limited capacities as human animals. We humans have a wonderful and fascinating and magical in so many ways, but we have limited sensory abilities and perception abilities. We can't possibly take in everything in the world around us, and we can't possibly make sense of all of it. And so between that meeting point of our limitations and the world's pretty much infiniteness around us, we created over early human history and right through to today, these forms of storytelling, of song, of poetry, of theatre, of visual arts to make sense of and help us make meaning of what's happening around us. So now is absolutely, Gabrielle, I agree, so much going on in the world. This is a time when we need to make use of these most ancient, powerful, beautiful tools to make sense of what's happening around us more than ever. And the more serious things get, the more we're going to need to lean back on these profoundly simple and beautiful honed tools that we have.
Thanks, Matt. That was, it makes me question why that question was even asked. It just becomes so obvious hearing both of you speak. Jen, do you have anything to add to those questions, or would you like me to move on to the next question?
I think I just have 2 points probably to address both Matt and Claire. Is the fact is it's only sort of in this Western world that we actually really separate art making and creativity into a different silo. Like, I mean, from a First Nations perspective, it is a part of your being, you know. So I think, and we are born creative. Anyone who has a child will see it, you know, as they develop language and so forth. And then the other thing I just wanted to add is a lot of my work is really thinking about intergenerational justice and thinking about accountability, you know, future ancestors, and thinking about how will they look back on this period in time. And, you know, they will hold our politicians accountable, you know, but at the same time, will they, you know, it was Amitav Ghosh in his book, The Great Derangement, where he said, you know, will they actually hold artists accountable too? Because it's not the politicians that actually, you know, activate the imagination, it's the artists.
So, Matt, you brought up this idea of questioning the value of art, and I guess we've read or heard reference to the IPCC report that called Code Red for Humanity. We've been told by Greta Thunberg, "I don't want your hope, I want you to panic." Do you think hope is part of that role of art, or is there something else that you seek to do when you're making art about climate, about these urgent political and humanitarian environmental issues that we're facing? I guess in essence what I'm asking is, what is that crucial relationship for you between art and activism? And if you could tell us about one of your pieces of work to illustrate that connection between art and activism, that would be great. Jen, I'll start with you for this one.
Oh, sure. Okay. I was just thinking, I was actually thinking of the conversation for everyone who's listening from home. Gabrielle was chaired a panel on activism and art a little while ago with APAM. And ever since that conversation, I've been really thinking a lot more about activism and art, and thinking a lot about sort of overt and covert activism, really, and that there are really dynamic ways in which you can constantly live your life as an activist. It's, you know, Richard Eckersley, an academic, said that, you know, when we think about perspectives around the apocalypse, we often revert to sort of nihilism or fundamentalist sort of thinking. But if we can actually step into an activist frame, it's focusing on what we can do. And it's putting, I mean, very simply, one foot in front of the other, right? So we as artists, I think we're very fortunate in this time right now that we actually are artists, because we do have something, you know, a way of expressing. And we are used to stopping and starting and finding ways of moving forward like water in many ways. So pass. Finish. I think that's all I have to say on that one. Yeah.
Can you tell us about one of your overt or covert works that you've done? Perhaps the work that you've done as part of Refuge. I don't know where that fits into that dichotomy, but yeah, or another work that you think could illustrate that.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think Refuge has I mean, now, you know, 6 years after we started, you know, we're looking back on that as a very prescient sort of work. And when we first started working, we didn't actually know what we were making. I mean, we had ideas, but we didn't know the implications of the work. So anybody who's not familiar with Refuge, since 2016, artists in emergency service, providers, academics, community members and local government have been rehearsing climate-related disaster scenarios. So from floods in 2016, heat waves, we did a pandemic in 2018 with the Peter Doherty Institute. We've been looking at humanitarian crises like climate-related displacement, and also what happens when these crises come together. And I think in essence, that work is activism, because we are stepping into a complete unknown, and we're getting into a space of being comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And right now, like when we're dealing with such complexity and such uncertainty, finding ways to actively live in that uncomfortable sort of feeling is important, because I mean, I think in many ways we fall back and we go, I want to be amongst like-minded people. I want to feel comfortable. You know, all of this volatility is too much. But if we can start, you know, leaning into those tensions and going into that imagining space of what could be and what would I do and who would I talk to and so forth, is a very active space.
So tell me, how did you rehearse climate disasters? Did you recreate them? Did you rehearse a response? You obviously been with lots of different sectors to be able to imagine what it was like. But what does it mean to rehearse something that you've never experienced? And what did it do for you at the time? And has it been relevant for you, for example, now in a pandemic, having kind of imagined and rehearsed it only 2 years earlier?
Oh yeah, so many things. So my daughter was 5 weeks old the first time that we went into the Refuge lab. So Refuge is a 3-step methodology of where we do an intensive, it's 3 to 5 days of working with anywhere 60 to 70 people that will go deep with the issue. So when we were looking at a flood, we brought in all different people to help us map, you know, what would a flood look like in Melbourne, and what are the sort of the likelihoods and so forth. When it came to a pandemic, we actually went to the Peter Doherty Institute. We got, you know, we were learning all about virology from Peter Doherty himself. We were looking at a lot of the complexities that we're seeing unfold right now, in terms of, you know, the debates around, you know, vaccinations, you know, what countries get the vaccinations first, you know, a lot of the social dilemmas also about how the balance of privilege tips in a disaster. We heard a lot of these from all of these different experts. And so what we did within the Refuge project is we held the complexity. Like, it was always about opening up and seeing, you know, what are the conversations that we're not having, who are the voices that we're not hearing from, you know, what are some of the skills and knowledges that are being overlooked or undervalued in this space, in these conversations. And then the artists would start to develop works around this. And these works would be in dialogue with one another. And then the last stage was an evaluation, so a dissemination of that information. And then to your other question about the pandemic, when in March, actually it was just close to January, February, when we were looking at coronavirus coming to Australia and having an impact, I was living in Fawkner, which was one of the most heavily impacted suburbs, which, I mean, the northern suburbs of Moreland right now are also being impacted again in this 4th wave. We had 181 cases and 45 deaths within 20 meters of our back door. So, you know, seeing what was going to be, you know, a likelihood, there were quite a few of us that mobilized and started a COVID response food hub, because we looked at the fact that our community was going to hurt, you know, and we needed to have healthy food access, impacting the community, or sort of supporting the community.
So it translated into something really, really tangible, really on the ground, but that was something that actually was extracted out of your art practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Claire, what about you? What is that crucial relationship between art and activism in your work? And I'd love to hear about how that plays out in your fiction works as compared with your most recent non-fiction work, if that is a kind of interesting that make.
In my fiction work as activism and talking about like apocalyptic scenarios and the concept of hope, what has been in my work from the beginning is the understanding that Aboriginal people around the world, Indigenous people from all around the world, have experienced the apocalypse before, and therefore we kind of know how to survive an apocalyptic scenario. And the perfect example of this is War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, which was the first modern science fiction novel and the first novel to come up with the idea of alien invasion, and all science fiction owes a debt to that novel, to War of the Worlds. That novel was written as an allegory for the invasion of Australia by the British. So if you think of it that way, in my fiction work, it's activism because it's all about exposing the colonizers in this country first, and that a couple of the works have gone overseas, therefore to colonize all over the world. that in the history of the places where colonies have been built, the colonizers are, quote, the bad guys. It's like the classic example is everyone grows up as kids playing cowboys and Indians, but then it never occurs to them to think that the cowboys are the bad guys. They're the colonizers. It doesn't occur to that just doesn't occur to us. And you think about other science fiction, like well, actually almost any science fiction movie involves to some extent these humans being the villains who are attacking another planet and colonizing it. And we don't think of it that way. So writing about science fiction and writing about colonization from a First Nations perspective puts these stories from their proper angle, and it kind of reasserts the hero villain dichotomy in the right direction, in that the heroes or the victims of colonization are the First Nations people, whereas in science fiction the victims are always the humans are always the heroes. And you think of things like Independence Day, where the aliens come and humanity managed to repel them. In reality, if you're writing a science fiction story about colonization, the weaker force will not repel the enemy. They will be taken over. And we are if someone's arrived here from another planet, we are the weaker force. And I suppose, and in my non-fiction, I also like to remind people of the truths that they don't want to think about. There's a real dynamic in our society of people not wanting to think about certain things. And a large part of my writing practice is about exposing people to those facts. And when lies are used as a weapon of oppression and a weapon of war, to tell the truth is an activist act. And we forget about the importance of truth.
So when you write about that flipping of perception or perspective of the weak and the strong, the colonizer and the colonized, of the lies and the truth, and you kind of seek to kind of turn that inside out, what are you seeking to activate? Is it a process of healing? Is it a learning of the past to be able to just move on? Or is it do you create, are you trying to find a way to deal with the distress of the past and teach how to deal with distress today? Are you able to pinpoint what you're trying to activate?
Yeah, I can, to at least some extent. It comes down, there's this like Australian mangling of language, the word reconciliation. The government always talks about reconciliation. We have Reconciliation Week. And I have an elderly relative who was talking about reconciliation. She said, damn it, it's not reconciliation. There was never a conciliation in the first place. And that's a classic mangled word. In Australia, we have the concept of reconciliation, which is supposed to be a restoration of good relations after a communication breakdown. There were no good relations between settlers and First Nation people. And then you think about the word reconciliation. In South Africa, they use that word as well. But after South African apartheid, they had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Whereas Australia wants reconciliation without talking about the truth. So initially, at the core of it, my work is about this idea that as a country, this colony will never heal until all the truth is exposed. Until the truth is exposed, this will be still be a violent colony that will never grow up. So we're going to start with the truth and then go from there. And that's kind of where it comes from. But also, I'm starting to work more about the idea of teaching, I suppose, in my writing, a sort of emotional resilience. This idea that it's not the skills that we have or the equipment we have that are going to help us survive an apocalypse. My recent work's been about the idea that it's actually our attitudes that determine who survives and who doesn't. It's our emotional strength that decides who survives and who doesn't. And which comes down to this idea of kind of in an apocalypse, who's going to survive, a banker or a homeless person? A homeless person's already survived on the streets with nothing. So I think they've already got the skills. And that, so that the kind of the hope comes from maybe the world can learn from the surviving First Nation people who survived an apocalypse on how to survive the next one.
What I hear from you is like how powerful language is. And I'm not just saying that because you're, the writer of the panel, but, even in visual arts practice, I think language is so, so important and powerful in setting those attitudes and creating that emotional strength, or in telling a story or in telling a lie. Like language is weaponized and used in that way, or in sanitizing the truth with language like reconciliation. And I was wondering if there was any kind of particular awareness that you have in how you use language to try to kind of covertly shift understandings or attitudes rather than, use exposition and try to, I guess, use your particular choice of language in the way that you write and how that kind of talks about your political reality.
Well, I always start from the assumption. There's an assumption that drives all my work, which, to summarize, I always say that we are nothing but the stories we tell about ourselves. So, our stories define us. If Australia just tells a story a certain way, then that's how the country will always see itself. We are literally nothing but stories. The only thing we can prove that exists about ourselves is our experiences and their stories. So just starting from that point, language enables you to break down your story or break down someone else's story and then rebuild it. And once someone's story has changed, they have changed. So if I can find the right words to make people see something differently, find the right story to see the world differently, they'll never see the world the same way again. I think that's what not all, but most writers are aiming for, to find that one story that people are different after they've read it than they were before, in some profound way. And that's all I'm ever trying to do. And finding the right words to do that is a very difficult thing. And it's kind of like, the secret chord or the perfect chord that musicians always talk about, this idea of finding a perfect note that you never find, or a painter looking for the perfect mark on a painting that they will literally never find. Well, I've been looking for the perfect sentence or the perfect story for years, and I won't find it. But that striving to find the perfect way to write a story that everyone who reads it will suddenly understand what they have to do to stop climate change, that dream will always be there. But I know I'll never achieve it. But it's the striving for something like that drives me to do work.
Thank you. That's incredible answers to those questions, and it brings me to Matt with a completely metamorphosized kind of question. I don't think the original question, it's lost in the history of time. So to Matt, I'll ask you, what stories do you tell about yourself? What is your perfect chord that you are seeking? What are you striving for when you try to make art?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that idea, Claire, the way you talk about our stories defining us, and that striving being the point, in a way, the process or the living of life. I know Carlos Rovelli, who's a Italian astrophysicist, talks about the fact that life is not an object, it's a happening. And so to find ourselves in that dance, in that song, in that movement of the happening of life is one of the things that I aim for in living and through my work, my artwork. The choice of language really, that question really resonates for me. I think when I write songs as a songwriter, as a musician, when I choose my words, I tend to try to write from a certain orientation. I'm bringing a consciousness of myself as part of nature, a consciousness of myself as part at the same time of colonization, of patriarchy, of these sort of forces that are in me because I've been brought up in the culture that I have. And there's an attempt to be honest, I suppose, in that, and an attempt to tell a different story to the ones that are a lot of the songs that I've heard and a lot of the stories that I hear us telling as humans about us, our superiority, our separateness from nature, our specialness in the world, beyond anything else. And so I guess there's a humility, there's an attempt to be honest, and that kind of shapes the language in certain ways. And sometimes I find myself like challenged by that and having to fight through. And sometimes I find myself flipping mid-song. So I've got some songs where I take different perspectives as I go in an attempt to try and see round the various sides of the things that I find myself inside of. And I love that about music and art more broadly, I suppose, that the possibility of holding seemingly contradictory or paradoxical ideas, thoughts, feelings, meanings at once. But for me, anything I write or create, I'm trying to find a way back home is the way that I guess I think about it, back home to a true place that I think, a lot of us have become disconnected from, bringing basically the living earth country back to the center, back to the heart of meaning and of purpose for my work.
When you talk about finding yourself inside of the world, inside of the crisis, inside of life that's happening, it makes me think of and I guess I would call it a work, but it was in your role as a facilitator where you brought in a guided meditation into the kind of introductory, probably half hour of a session, where you situated yourself on a ship in crisis, as a metaphor for the climate crisis. And that was years and years ago. And I still feel moved by the kind of chilling situating through this kind of very obvious metaphor. Or it was obviously a metaphor, but you brought us right into the moment and into the emergency by activating it through that kind of mechanism. And I wondered if you wanted to talk about that work, or whether that's something you'd like audiences to experience as they come across your work and your facilitation processes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to speak about that. Thanks for your reflections on it, Gabrielle. It's a piece that I've done a couple of storytelling pieces like that, and that one is about power, and yes, an analogy for where we find ourselves on a sinking ship and how we might respond collectively. And I've sort of integrated into those. It's sort of a story that starts out, I tell it as if I'm telling a true story that really happened, and it gets more and more fantastical as I go. And it starts to become very quickly obvious that this is a bullshit story that is, you know, a fictional story or a bit of magic realism in there where that couldn't really happen, but here we are. And hopefully with enough connections to the real world and a, you know, pretty solid, obvious metaphor, as you say, to pull us through. I've filmed it recently so people can go and watch it, and I think it's going to be part of one of the other sessions as part of this big expo as well. But yeah, in that, I don't know, I struggled. I found it really challenging, I have to say. Goes back maybe to the very start of this thread of the question that you started, Gabrielle, around the link between art and activism. I didn't want to be telling anyone what to do. I didn't want to be too didactic. In some ways, I think of it less as an artwork, more of a glorified talk or something. I don't know. I think about it in particular ways, I suppose, to help myself make sense of it. But yeah, I had to find a way through so that I was felt like I was presenting something that people could then find their own way into. And I found also that I'm able to present that, you know, I've told that story at arts events, I've told it at to school groups, and I've told it to like groups of suits, like people like climate scientists and government folks. And people are able to be open to it because it's a metaphor, because I'm not just standing there showing them graphs and stats and facts, but because I'm presenting this stuff in a different way. I think it does create some openness.
You mentioned trying to make sense of things through the process of making work. And I think that process of kind of detecting a grain of sand in there, something that you're uncomfortable with, some kind of injustice or crisis situation that you want to explore, and through the making of the work you actually research and uncover your own understanding of what's going on. And I wonder if any of your work deals with coming face to face with apathy and distress that a lot of us feel when we spend enough quiet time thinking about the climate of urgency.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, the second similar storytelling piece that I've done like that one is called Field Recording. And it's about a trip that I took into the Daintree rainforest about a decade ago. And along the way, I do confront exactly that, the sense of extinction that's happening now, the sixth grade extinction that we're living through right now, and the sense of hopelessness of that. And in that storytelling, I talk about, I meet a bunch of characters along the way. And I talk about the fact that I don't know what to do in the face of that. And I very much felt, I talked with the other piece about, you know, not wanting to tell anyone what to do. I felt very much in the face of that grief, that despair, that the weight of this stuff, that I almost felt like a fraud if I was going to get up and try and share what I thought was some sort of an answer. I get a little bit sick of, I think, you know, everyone seems to have the answers to everything. You know, there's the books on solving the climate crisis. Everyone's got the perfect tweet that's going to solve everything. Everyone's got opinions. There's so many opinions. And I didn't want this to be that. And so I left that out of it and still found a way to land something. And so for me, it was an opportunity to be open in front of people and to literally feel into what that felt like, to feel those feelings live in front of an audience, to have the waves of grief sort of settle in parts of my body and to express those and to welcome them in front of an audience. And for me, it was really freeing and profound. And I learned through that process that, you know, the grief that we feel is the other side of the coin to the love that we have for life, for the living planet that we're a part of. And that if we don't feel and let in and welcome and hold the grief in a kind way, then we also don't have access to the love, and we become numb is the risk. And that was a beautiful learning for me, and that's the thing that I took away from pulling that together.
I can hear through all three of your responses to these questions how transformative make work is for you and your collaborators and your intimate or sometimes bigger audiences that come across your work, and how that's such an important part is the kind of transformational aspect to what you're doing. So I guess this brings me to my next question, which is how can we expand or amplify or even share that effect? How can we broaden the reach of our art about climate? And is that even the right question? Or is it contingent on being intimate and slow and domestic, you know, or is it confined to a particular scale, and is that just inherent in the making of particular types of art? I'll go to Claire.
I think we're at the stage now where it's kind of too late to do art about climate change and about the sixth extinction and how much we're fucking the world up. It's too late to do it on a small, intimate scale. That's too slow. I think we need to aim our kind of art as broad as possible, and to try and reach as many people as possible as quickly as possible. And sure, there's always room for the small scale. And I always remember punk singer and spoken word artist Jen Rae was saying, don't hate the media, become the media. And with that, he didn't mean our obsession with Twitter and Instagram. What he meant was speak to people in their lounge rooms. When you're at a party, tell them about what's wrong with the world, and be the media on a one-on-one sort of viral level. Because but that has to go on still. I think the viral has got more power than the kind of the broadcast in our modern world. But I think we still have to broadcast our ideas as broadly as possible, so that we can reach an audience as fast as possible. Because really, climate change has reached the point where it's inevitable. And what we're no longer trying to stop climate change. What we're trying to do is find ways for people to cope with it. That's where we are now. We are at the point now where we're all going to have to cope. And not only we're going to have to cope, the next generation is going to cope, but every generation after that's going to have to cope. And I definitely think it's too late to be working slowly.
That certainly resonates for me. Although I can imagine having been part of Matt's audience in that presentation and how profoundly I would have taken that with me. But the quote that you mentioned, "Don't hate the media, become the media." To me, it rings, "Don't hate the mayor, become the mayor." And having moved to the dark side of politics myself, it really was partially about having spent 15 years in the arts and come to the limits of that, of the change that I could affect through my artwork, and thinking, well, if I've imagined that there is a space on the side of politics for an artist, a principled artist like myself, well, then I almost have a responsibility to actually take that leap and access that broader audience and that direct action so much more directly. So that the kind of too late, too slow kind of fear was definitely with me as an artist. But I'd like to hear what Jen thinks about this.
Sorry about that. I'm just thinking of this time. I'm going to tell a little story. Claire, you're in on this one. Claire and I were on a residency on a boat in Sydney Harbour in between the bushfires and the pandemic breaking out. And we were put on the spot to do a performance piece. And it was at the time where we had spent a lot of time learning from a lot of the First Nations mob there about I was going to say Stephen Harper, he's just as bad, he's the Canadian version. Scott Morrison's plan to sail the Endeavour replica around Australia, which if you read Claire's book, you know that that's lies, damn lies. And every day we had to look at this replica, and all of this money was going into this, and our prime minister had gone off to Hawaii, and it was causing in myself a certain sense of rage. And I kept thinking about resistance over rebellion and the power of resistance, and also that there was something about feeling like we were all sort of like in this mass disillusionment or a certain sense of psychosis. So I wrote this performance called Sleepwalking into Extinction. And to the to the great organizers of Sydney Festival, we were able to take our boat right by Kirribilli House to do the performance. And Claire and I, at that point, we'd met previously, but we decided we were going to check in and we were going to have a dialogue all of 2020. And so Claire and I actually sat and we connected pretty much every week for about 2 or 3 hours. And we would eat and we'd chat. And this is where we wrote Refugium, and which is a film that will be shown here. And I felt like at that time we were hearing a lot around there was that climate, that big convergence, that climate convergence that was at Melbourne Town Hall, and I kept hearing this rhetoric, a call to arms. Everything was a call to arms, and like this military sort of mobilization. I'm hearing it in the arts. And I'm going, this is really dangerous. This is not what we should actually be hearing. We should be listening to, how can we amplify voices that aren't being heard? How can we be talking about treaty? How can we be engaging our younger people, through whether it's mentorship, but I think we need to be asking really active questions about amplification and collaboration and storytelling, like the ways in which, the things that we share with each other, that we make it meaningful, and that we're not necessarily thinking about what's going on in our everyday realities, but thinking about the realities that our future generations are going to be experiencing if we don't act. And just to finish one last thing, when you brought up the IPCC, it reminded me of the fact that it was 2018, I think, where they said we had 12 years left, right? And gosh, the next one's coming out and it's going to be far more dire. But when that one came out, I was completely gutted and didn't know how I was actually going to put that foot forward. And I went and I started Googling what happened 12 years before that, and what had changed in 12 years. And that's where I actually found hope, because in that time, Twitter was invented and Facebook was invented and iPhones were invented and and iPods and all of these sorts of technologies that have transformed our social environment, right? And this is where, time is ticking, we're probably 9-10 years now, but we still have time to do transformational work. And it might not be the stuff that affects our generations, but it actually might be transformational for people that we are yet to meet.
What's one of the tools that you find yourself reaching for over and over again? What's that kind of linchpin of your practice? It sounds to me like the conversations that you were having with Claire is kind of a central tool. Is that right to identify that as kind of crucial to your mode of working?
Yeah, conversations are very much a part of this. I think there's a resistance to not reinvent the wheel, to collaborate, to find people who have that expertise and to work with them and find ways to work with them to really be outside of comfort zones. I've moved from Fawkner, which is a very culturally diverse neighborhood, to Castlemaine, which is a very different experience and different sense of diversity, but I'm actually a bit more comfortable up here, and I go back to Fawkner and I'm seeing, the pandemic impacting that community, and I'm hearing stories on that front line and saying, how is this happening? There are people who are overstaying their visas, and the federal government is coming in and taking, they're saying the breadwinners, but they're technically, the people who have it's crumbs, you know, we're seeing things unfolding there, and then I'm coming here and it's really uncomfortable. So I'm sharing that, like I'm having conversations, because I don't want people to feel comfortable. I'm more scared of people being uncomfortable than I am with us being uncomfortable. And I think we will find strength in I guess sitting with that and welcoming that into our life.
Do you seek to exacerbate that discomfort in your work, or have you seen other works where you have identified discomfort as a really important technique?
Yeah, it's critical to my work. Like I can think of a lot of my work where I take people to that edge, and then I often say I'll take you to that edge, and then I'll let you down gently. You know, I feel like it's like running a marathon, right? Anyone who has done, you know, Bikram yoga or ran a marathon knows that you have to, once you hit that point that you think you can't go on any longer, that's when you start to you know, magic happens. And so that is definitely a part of my work. And Claire and I in Refuge, we went there.
To talk a bit about that work, knowing that it's going to be screened as part of this live stream series later on. Don't want you to spoil anyone who wants to engage with it later, but can you tell us about how you do that in Refugium? Or work if you feel it illustrates it better.
Yeah, Claire, I mean, I can also welcome Claire into this conversation as well. Like, I think we were looking at the fact that we both work in speculative futures, and a lot of the work that we were doing and writing about and thinking about was actually coming at us at a rapid rate. And it was almost in that sort of traumatizing state where you can't think about the future. And Claire Claire could get into the dark much faster than I could. And I kept saying, I have a small child at home, right? I have to think about how do I still carry hope when I know about all of this darkness. And so Refugium sort of was a work that came about thinking about child-centered trauma prevention and intergenerational justice, and thinking about what are the skills and knowledges that our future generations are going to need, and who are the people who have them, and how do we start connecting some of these complexities. And when we really started doing the work, we really brought it back to story, that you know, the colonial project has obliterated stories and language and food, and we need to start reconnecting, because a lot of these knowledges and a lot of these skills are at the threshold of being lost. And those of us who have grandparents and relationships with different communities, we need to start building up this knowledge, but not knowledge as power, but knowledge that can become a part of a public pedagogy, that we share this knowledge, that it doesn't stay behind closed doors, and that we can be experimental and put things out into the public space and have conversations. And so that's in many ways, you know, what informed Refugium. And maybe Claire, you have more to add to that.
Well, one thing I would add is we walked really kind of really fine line between hope and despair, and I think that's kind of in the writing. I find kind of emotional tension to be quite fertile for writing, and the emotional tension between hope and despair when facing the climate crisis was one that I worked into it, I think, and it was. Neither Jen nor I had actually attempted a project like Refuge before, so it was kind of that was, and in a way that tension of trying to work on something we've never actually tried to achieve before, was also a tension worth working into. So, and I think for me the most important thing in the tension in hope and despair is this thing I always talk about, which is pessimistic but hopeful, which is expecting the worst but always hoping for the best. Like hoping you're wrong. Like expect the worst going to happen, but hoping you're bloody wrong. That's what I've been all about.
That feels so familiar, really familiar. knowing you're probably not wrong, but still hoping you are, because what other option do we have, really? So we're kind of way through this discussion. At this point, I just want to thank the three of you for being so open and generous, really kind of letting us into that compendium of knowledge that you hold, and sharing your views on art making and the climate crisis. Before we open it up to audience questions, and I hope that there are lots in the chat that Tenniel and Sebastian will be processing right now, I want to just get the listeners activated a bit more. Now, we can't see you, but you can all see each other in the chat. And with a live audience, I'd usually shake people up a bit with a bit of a game of stand up, sit down. I used to be a sex education teacher, and this technique works just as well with a room full of frightened 7-year-olds as it does with a room full of professionals or artists or politicians. So it goes like this. I'm going to just say a statement, and if you identify with what I'm saying, or if you agree with what I'm saying, I want you to do a thumbs up emoji in the chat. Or if you don't identify with it, or if you disagree with it, you can do a thumbs down. You also feel free to use your creative license within the full palette of the emoji spectrum that's provided to you. All right, we will start with stand up if you are wearing Ugg boots. Oh, no, it's emoji. Emoji with wearing Ugg boots. I'll give a couple of seconds for that to come about. And Sebastian and Tenniel, you might, if you are able to see the live stream, feel free to do some live commentary at this point.
We're currently showing everybody what shoes we're wearing, or lack of shoes.
Yeah, I've kicked off my Ugg boots and I'm in socks, so I don't think, it should have been put your hand up if you're wearing any kind of shoe, which I think would be limited. All right, the next one is stand up if you think that, or thumbs up if you think that our response to the climate crisis is appropriate to the scale of the crisis. Thumbs up if you think that our response to the climate crisis climate change is appropriate. What's the response looking like?
Well, everyone's telling us they're wearing socks. I think we've got a little bit of a delay.
Okay, my mum.
But everyone is saying no.
My mum's wearing Uggs.
Good. Alison's got Uggs on, but everyone is. It's thumbs downs and no's.
Lucy's got Uggs on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've moved on.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I think the contrast of those two questions is illustrative of our lack of ability to respond to the climate crisis.
Yep.
All right. So thumbs up if you think you personally managed to walk that line between hope and despair with skill or aptitude. Thumbs up if you think you managed that line between hope and despair. What's coming through in the chat?
We've got a couple of thumbs down.
I've got my thumb half up, and we've got some nays. And someone said, yeah, otherwise I'd be dead. We've got some ellipses.
A lot of people thinking.
Yeah.
I think that it's a particularly difficult question to ask at this point in time when it's very hard to get outside of yourself. And I think we're all really at the end of our tether with lockdowns. So it's hard not to get really dark on that, on the despair side rather than the hope side. Also, as artists, if you're used to kind of making work and being able to externalize all of that, I can imagine that it would feel really, really frustrating at this time not to be able to actually have any output, and to have shows cancelled, and just that uncertainty. Anyway, the next one. So this is around funding. Thumbs up if you think that the source of funding does not influence the artist, the institution, or the art that it enables. So I'll repeat that one. Put your thumbs up if you think that the source of funding, so sponsorship, grants, if you think it doesn't have any influence on the art, the institution, or the art that it enables.
We got thumbs down.
There's very quick thumbs down there.
Waiting for any other comments. A single thumbs down for that.
Okay, that's a good answer on behalf of the audience. All right, and two more. Thumbs up if you think that creating positive alternatives is more effective when making art than resisting or commenting on injustice. So thumbs up if you think that creating positive alternatives is more effective than resisting injustice. And of course, with the absolute acknowledgement that that life is not a dichotomy, that these are binaries, and that there's so much nuance and it depends in between. What do you think, Sebastian and Tennille? Is resisting injustice easier and more effective than creating positive alternatives?
Jeez, difficult question.
I don't.
We've
think
got someone
so.
said no thumb, not so binary.
No.
Yeah.
I think there's space for both.
I think you can actually do both at the same time. It's about, I guess, which one you kind of showcase.
I think you have to do both at the same time. If you do one without the other, nothing happens.
Yeah. And when I do this in a room, sometimes I also do it on a spectrum. So it's actually like one option down one end of the room and the other option down the other end of the room. So you can place yourself on that spectrum as to where you see yourself. So definitely not just this binary opposition. Okay, the last one is thumbs up if you think that artists should be willing to break the rules.
Waiting. Surely everyone's going to say yes.
Yep. We've got some yeses.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes. Okay, all right. Great. Well, a ticket to my next question, which will be the last question from me before we go to the audience, which is to the panelists: in making art in the climate crisis, what rules are you willing to break and what rules have you broken? Jen.
Yeah, the covert activism. I think risk-taking experimentation right now is critical. It's absolutely what we have as a certain currency, and I think it's all cards on the deck. I was actually just recently explaining Claire's book the other day, and I was trying to say to somebody, it's like the political move where you throw a dead cat on the table, right? And everyone, and so if anyone doesn't know that term, it's kind of like, something really bad is happening, and what happens is the political leaders will throw a dead cat on the table. Everyone will look at it, and they don't pay attention to what's going on over here.
Or a dead Donington.
Yeah, or dead possum. I think right now we need this, but we need to look at it, and we can't look away. So that sort of risk taking, or that what was the word that you used? Like, what were we willing to do? Yeah, so something I've done. I prawn bombed the Endeavour, that boat that I was just talking about. That was in Sydney Harbour. Prawn bombed the Endeavour, so it wasn't able to sail. And then the pandemic came, and that project. I think that's one of the greatest ways to do something very covertly, because the smell happens long after you've left. And if anyone's not familiar with prawn bombing, it's a matter of taking very old prawns and covertly putting them in places, and then waiting for the 35-degree day.
I feel like placing them in covert places and waiting for the smell to take effect is like a metaphorical, is like an allegorical way of saying something, but it is very literal in this case.
Yeah, and I mean, I was terrified like doing this, because here, I did my master's on art and activism, there was a certain amount, and also not wanting, I was never sort of that person who would carry the banner or to be that covert, but was doing a lot of covert activism all the time in my practice. But this was something of putting my skin in the game. And that's the way that I look at the things that we do now is, we're running out of time in many ways.
What about you, Claire? Risk-taking, rule-breaking, is that a...
There's only I think it's easy for me to state the rules I will not break to do art. I won't ever insult the culture of Indigenous people around the world is rule one, and rule two is I always punch up, never punch down. Except for those rules, everything else is fair game. Really, if it has to be done, it has to be done. But, so basically, as long as you don't kind of hurt people who are kind of in a weaker socio-political position than yourself, do what you got to do.
That's great. I like to have, the untouchable rules, as well as just this open idea of being able to break rules. It's really important to know which ones, when to walk the line, like what are the parameters that we give for ourselves to operate effectively, respectfully, and with dignity and respect. I think that's really important. Matt, what about you?
I love and am hereby subscribing to Claire's rules. For other than that, I think I'm in the process right now, like a caterpillar in the state of going gooey, metamorphosizing into a butterfly. I feel like I'm in the process of breaking down some rules for myself at the moment. I've Gabrielle, you read out my bio before, and I've worked for over a decade as a sustainability consultant, helping organizations be more green. I still do a bit of that work. I've worked with emerging leaders, be they school strike students or people from across the sort of sustainability, environment, climate change spectrum, and current day climate activist groups as well, supporting them as a facilitator, like coming in and helping them have important conversations, make decisions and so on as groups of humans. But in doing all that work, I have seen a lot of burnout. And I think it goes back a little bit to the point that Jen was making about the ways we talk about activism as war, as a fight, as a battle. And I've seen a lot of burnout, and I worry a lot about our ongoing next steps. As Claire mentioned before, there's a need now not to stop doing the beautiful and important work of bringing Mother Earth back to the center of our lives and our cultures and trying to heal, but also of caring for ourselves and each other as we go through the coming decades, there's going to be some tough stuff there. And for an insight into that, you can watch Jen and Claire's film. But so yeah, my aim right now, the thing I think I'm shifting for myself, the rule I'm trying to break is that for me as an artist, to be doing activism necessarily means some sort of a fight. And I'm looking and trying to understand what that might be otherwise. And to do that, I'm looking to old, strong wisdom from people who aren't me, and I'm listening to the land as well. I recently read a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And in that book, she talks about the fact that even a wounded, I'm paraphrasing, but even a wounded world still gives us everything, still gives us life and love and relationships and strawberries and, you know, everything. Even a wounded world still gives us everything. And so our first response to that needs to be grateful. And then our second act needs to be to reciprocate. So I'm interested in breaking the rules of art as activism, as warfare, and what does it look like art as activism, as love, as kindness, as care. And I'm interested in doing that as a male, as a, you know, white male with all sorts of baggage and privilege that entails, and hoping to bring that into my work. And along with seeing lots of burnout, I've had my own share of that the last few years. I've had chronic fatigue. So it's a physical and emotional and spiritual imperative for me to find a way through like that.
I'm sorry to hear you're struggling with that. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I respond to that, Matt?
Yeah, please.
Because we in Refuge, we work, and I'm also on the Creative Recovery Network's board. We look a lot at disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And in this sort of pandemic, what we've really seen is that we saw lots of food material aid networks. We saw a lot of people responding to the first wave of crises, right? And a lot of energy and time went into that. You know, we're in our fourth wave, right? We're hearing a lot about pandemic burnout, pandemic exhaustion, and so forth. We aren't really attending to caring for the front line, right? We're not caring for the carers. And I think that that's really important. And psychologist Rob Gordon, he's done a lot of work around disasters. And he says that, you know, if in first waves, people respond and complex societies or complex identities will flatten, and they'll come together in the name of social cohesion or nationhood or anything like this. But it's those second and third waves. If we don't actually have the social infrastructure to support communities to return to their complex identities and so forth, what we have civil unrest, disillusionment, and mental illness. So right now, this is what we're seeing in the last few weeks, and it's likely to continue. So I think one of the most radical things we can do right now is care for one another and create a sense of belonging and checking in on people, and all of these seeds of division that are trying to be sowed, that our resistance is actually saying, no, we're going to come together.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw it open now to questions from the audience who have been listening. To Neil and Sebastian, you've been keeping an eye on the chat. Can you throw a question? And I think I'll leave it to the panelists to put yourselves forward to answer the questions as they come. And maybe we don't have to hear from all three of you on each one.
For sure. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say shout out to my mum, Shazza, who's in the chat, because she said, it depends on the rule, which then Claire G. Coleman backed up. So, of course, my mum's a teacher, so of course she would say that.
Gonna move this over here so you can see.
So, okay, here we go. We've got a great question from Hunter, and it's specifically they'd like to ask Claire. In regards to language, can you give us any advice on how we can alter the ways in which we speak about the climate in relation to colonialism, especially to those who might not understand that connection, in ways that are perhaps more palatable than are currently presented to us in mainstream media?
That's a big one. That's a huge question. In reality, I suppose I don't have a simple answer, but I can kind of help you find a path. In reality, climate change is an effect of capitalism. That can't be debated. That's not really up for debate. Sure, climate change predates modern capitalism to an extent because we had coal fire burning, but But climate change is driven by greed, and most people don't realize this. But colonization and colonization is actually also a tool of capitalism. Colonization and capitalism exist hand in hand. You wouldn't have colonization without capitalism, and capitalism got to where it is now through colonization. So I suppose finding some way to pull them together. The fact that climate change is colonial is kind of a way to look at it. I'm not sure there is a palatable way to say it, and I'm not really so sure there should be.
I guess that glue that binds them together is capitalism, and that kind of makes the equation make sense. Thanks, Claire. Tanil, another question from the audience?
Yes, I just lost it. There's a lot of stuff coming through in the chat. But it was, I do have one from earlier, because we were talking about why make art now. And I guess it's been kind of a little bit answered, but if anyone has anything to add to it, what kind of art should we be making?
Jen, do you want to answer that one? Or anyone? I did say you could just jump in, but I thought Jen might be.
Yeah, I mean, there have been people working in sort of environmental art space for decades, right? So there's a whole body of knowledge that's there. I think in many ways, there's ways in which art in this space can be used to raise awareness. It can be, to amplify or illuminate things that might be, hidden. But I think it's really important that we as artists aren't reinventing the wheel, that we aren't necessarily disseminating information that is incorrect. I think that there's really powerful ways in which we can audit our skills and our knowledges and so forth, and see what we can contribute to the whole, to the larger questions. And I think for artists that are established and that have been practicing for a really long time, it's now our time to step up and actually start mentoring young people, and for people who are in positions of power to create platforms for young voices and for voices that we just are not hearing in this discourse, in the climate change discourse.
Matt or Claire, did you want to add to that?
Yeah.
It's a very broad question.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a quote that I love, and I'll share it, and then but I'll add to it for this context and for these times, I suppose. The quote is, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And I love that quote. And so directly to this, I think, don't ask what art the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. But I would add to it, I think that the thing that to find what really makes you come alive, not what capitalism tells you makes you come alive, or these systems and structures that we're a part of that are actually unhealthy for ourselves, for our communities, and for life. Then we need to slow down and listen deeply to the land, to country, to and to other cultures, to First Nations peoples and elders, and then make a decision about what art to make. So if it comes, I think, from the frazzled Twitter brain of our 21st century minds, if it comes from a desire to impress others in this world, or to look or feel a certain way immediately in the short term, then I don't think we're going to make the right choices. I think if we slow down and listen to our deeper selves and the biggest self that we are actually a part of the life and the planet and the universe, then we can find that right thing. And then, as Jen said, fucking go for it.
Thank you.
Paraphrasing.
I've got something to add now. There's kind of two sayings that come together, two ideas kind of together. One of them is, there's that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. That one's a bit obvious. There's also something that some people say, and I say it to people all the time when I'm mentoring and writing, which is make the art you want to exist. So, in other words, the art you should make is the art that you think yourself will make a difference. And it's possibly that you're the only person who can make that work of art. So think what would make a difference to you and make that art.
The frustrating thing is when you see someone else's art and you feel like you would have made that art if you had made it. But that, to me, is often the real marker of someone that's really hit you, is when you feel like actually that could have come from yourself, or you wish it had at least. Tanil, do we have another question lined up?
Yes, we do, from Lucy and Gonzalo. What is artists' role in capitalism? And to what extent do we extend its reach by customizing taste?
What is artists' role in capitalism, and to what extent do we extend its reach by customizing tastes? Is that?
Yep, you nailed it.
Can I throw that to you?
Was that to me?
Oh,
sorry, or throw it just to us. Sorry, my headphones and my tea delivery. Sorry.
Matt,
capitalism.
Oh, go for it, Jen. If you've got thoughts on it, or
I think take money out of the whole thing, which is really a hard thing to take on board right now, especially in light of how the arts have been just completely not, just damaged in so many ways. But I think thinking about time and energy are really important, and finding other ways of different economies of trade, and also thinking, going back to that basic income, and advocacy and so forth. I think that's a critical thing that we can all be advocating for. There's a lot that we can do with the basic income. And I think in terms of Fawkner Commons, I lost all my work for 2020. It was all wiped out within a week. And being eligible for that $3,000 a month or whatever it was, allowed me to put my time and energy into some community hyper-local activities. So I think the ways in which we can step out of those economies that are around money and hubris and power and so forth, that's resistance. Instead, just not having your skin in that game is powerful.
I think capitalism has no place in art, but also think art is the only industry where people are expected to starve to death in order to do the right thing. Capitalism has no place in medicine, but doctors get paid. Capitalism has no place in making your toilets flush, and yet we pay plumbers. So if you think about it that way, capitalism has no place in our society, but capitalism is what we've got. So I think as much as capitalism has no place in anything, for some reason it's only art, particularly writers, are the only people who the expectation as society is that we don't need to be paid for the work we do.
I think remuneration for labour is often confounded with an idea of capitalism, but I think that capitalism is a much more multifaceted parasite than just being paid for the work that you do. Matt, did you have anything to add on that? And I guess the question was the role of art in capitalism, but I guess it could also be the role of art in the face of capitalism. I don't know if it's intended to be that implicit in capitalism through the question.
It's a cool, interesting space to think into, isn't it? I think that capitalism, it seems to me that the problem with capitalism is right there in its name, that it's putting capital before everything else. It's the prioritization of capital. And that's why we've grown capital phenomenally well, and we're destroying communities and planet and ecosystems and rivers and mountains and, landscapes and you name it. So if that's true, then yeah, I mean, that's not a healthy thing to feed. That's not a beast that you want to grow bigger and stronger. You want to do the opposite. So having said that, I think the reality is that no matter what we do right now, everything we do is in some ways wrapped up in these systems. So I don't want to get bent out of shape or crushed by the sense of guilt of kind of inevitably being a little bit tied to this thing that I'm trying to bring down. And I think that's part of the thing for us as artists to be conscious of, that we could potentially burn ourselves out or swamp ourselves or not make sure we have enough money to be fed, as Claire was talking about, in order to do this in some sort of perfect way, which isn't actually possible, which isn't actually achievable or realistic or healthy. So I think ideally our work would be as much as possible pointed towards unpicking whatever this thing of capitalism is and the most harmful aspects of it, whether that be shining a light on what's wrong or pointing to the beautiful luminescent heart of life, you know, the trembling thing at the edge of our vision, that makes worth living. And in capitalism, we need that more than ever, because capitalism splits us apart from each other, tells us we're individuals, tells us we're special and separate from nature, which we're not. And so I want to see art that weaves that tapestry, that blanket back together again.
Thank you for those answers. I think we'll go to one more question from the audience, to Neil.
There isn't another question. If anyone has one, would you like to pop it in the chat? Any burning questions that you've been holding on to? Now's your chance.
Or in the absence of another question from the audience, I guess I would really like to ask from the panelists, and I won't say a call to arms, I'll say a call to action. What's your call to action for the audiences listening tonight, whether they are artists or activists or neither, don't identify at the moment? What would you like to draw them into and push them into?
I've got a call to action I use a lot. Jen's probably heard me use it about 1 million times, which is truth is viral, you've been infected, pass it on.
Yeah.
Which is, that's one of my favourite lines. And it's true, because lies are viral and truth is viral. So like why pass on the lies when you can pass on the truth?
Yeah. I just got a bonus little check that came in, nothing much, and I am using the whole thing to buy Claire's books, copy of Lies Damn Lies, and I'm going to be putting it on every single cafe, covert place in Castlemaine. Like, that's my spreading the truth, you know.
Excellent. But literally, you have taken Claire's mandate.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wanted to add to that as a call to action is Shannon Hayes's book, Radical Homemakers. She says that, you know, every once in a while, you know, people get this awareness, a moment of awareness. And I think, and in that awareness, it might be like a skills deficit or a knowledge deficit or something like that. And what they'll do is they'll go and seek out knowledge, or they'll try and retrain or anything like that. And that's very much within a survivalist mindset, right? Where you actually transcend it is actually doing a skills and auditing of what you already have and seeing how abundant that is. The capitalist mindset actually is about what we don't have. We all have a lot. Like where Shannon Hayes is saying is actually connecting it to others and seeing how you can amplify the work of others. And I think that is something that we can do immediately. We can think of, you know, there are, you know, young people, but younger people who, you know, have incredible skills in the digital world that, you know, I don't have, or, you know, or there's, you know, people that are great at crafting stories and so forth. How do they come together? You know, that's when we're going to see, you know, and we've seen a lot of it in COVID. You know, we've seen a lot of innovation in COVID, especially with, you know, creative solutions and so forth. So more of that.
Thank you. I love that. You're abundant. Connect your abundance to other people's abundance. Yeah. Matt.
It's a good question, isn't it? What do we want to draw people into? I think picking up on some of the things that have been shared tonight by each of us, there was the question earlier on about hope. I'd like to encourage everyone to find the hope that makes sense to them. I heard someone saying the other day that, no matter what happens in terms of climate change and parts per million or degrees of warming, 4 degrees is a lot worse than 3 degrees, is a lot worse than 2 degrees, is a lot worse than 1.5 degrees of warming. So there's no point at which working to change things isn't a good idea. There's no point at which that becomes a fact. Also, there are always ways to improve the world, to improve the life of others, those who are less safe, comfortable, privileged than yourself. So turning your attention there, I think, makes a lot of sense in that work. And also a reminder that in all of that, the world is freaking beautiful, always. So yeah, I don't want to push anyone into anything in particular, but I do want to encourage people to in the rush and the push and the hustle and the anxiety and the stress and the genuine struggle of now, to slow down and move at the speed for a moment or for an hour, if you can, of your nervous system, and let yourself breathe, and preferably do it with a tree nearby and or a creek, and to let that moment tell you what it is that you need to do. And you won't, I don't think you'll go wrong if you let that moment speak to you.
Thank you, all three of you, for your insights and your wisdom. It's been a really wonderful couple of hours speaking with you. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our discussion tonight. Thank you also to everyone who joined us for this event, who watched and followed along with the live stream and participated in the chat. We really appreciate you spending your Thursday night with us talking about the role of art in climate action. And a huge, huge, huge thank you to our panelists, Claire G. Coleman, Jen Rae, and Matt Wicking. You have provided so much possibility in thinking about the role of art and elevating public discussion in connection with and action on the climate emergency. I hope that what you, the audience, has heard tonight has made you hungry to find out more about the work of these collectively magnificent artists, and that you do pursue finding out more about them. I feel like I've taken so much away from this, and just to kind of reflect on some of the things that I've heard tonight, as well as those lovely kind of nuggets of wisdom that you left us with at the end there. I think some of the things that will stick with me are the quote from the beginning, that we are nothing but the stories we tell ourselves. The imperative to find yourself inside the world, inside the crisis, to break rules, but also to make rules, to punch up, but it might not be a fight, to never insult the Indigenous custodians of the land you're on, to reciprocate and to care for each other, to remember that the grief that bubbles up inside you is the flip side of the love that we have for the world that we're in. Ask what art makes you come alive. Find different economies of trade, new tools, different language. Slow down next to a tree, but not too slow, because it's too late to go too slow. And aim for as many people and be as broad as possible. Go to the edge of discomfort. So thank you for all of that. I distilled a few things in a few sentences, but the richness of this conversation tonight has been really inspiring. We'd love you to tune into the next 3 live stream events, as well as Council's regular Take Climate Action programming. as you've heard, tonight's artists will have their short films featured in the Big Locals Short Film Night, which is happening on the 7th of October. And we'll be showing Jen and Claire's film Refuge and Matt's live performance Lost at Sea. So for more details about the live stream events, please visit the Melbourne Fringe Festival website. It's where you would have got the link for this event tonight. And for more information about these events and council climate programs, you can get in touch through the Yarra City Council website, which is yarracity.vic.gov.au/climate action. With much gratitude for everything that I've heard tonight, I'm going to throw back to Neil and Sebastian, and with a final thank you to them for making this opportunity available to us and to our audiences.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you so much. Before we close your Zoom room, I just wanted to read out specifically, there's a lot of thank yous coming through in the chat, and people saying it's been very inspiring. And this one particular standout comment from Lindy Luz saying, you have all made me more inspired than I have felt since the beginning of the pandemic. Seriously, thank you. And lots of people echoing that. This has been really amazing. I feel really grateful, and I feel like I might cry because it feels like, yes, it worked. My plans. So thank you very much. We're going to let the panelists and Gabrielle, Mayor of Yarra, go. We're going to stick around for the next 10 minutes if anyone would like to stay and chat. And I will share some links, and Seb will play some music. So thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you. Good night.
See ya.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.
All right, well, the rest of us can stick around and have a cry together. Well, this was the first episode in a series of live streams, the Big Local. We're just here till 9 o'clock. This is something Sebi and I have been running live streams since, I think, August in 2020 as just a way to bring our community together while we're stuck in lockdown, to have chats and to talk about what's going on and just hang out together and be silly together. I feel really privileged to have been able to have a job this year. I was unemployed since before the pandemic, and so as Jen was saying earlier, it was really awesome to get that JobKeeper and be able to continue to make art. And then this year to be working 2 days a week as artists in residence, I really wanted to, it's specifically in community art. So obviously I want to make something that a lot of people can benefit from. When I started my residency, part of my role was to make something about engaging the community in climate action. And I really had to face my own apathy, because even though I make interactive educational art about waste and ethical consumption, which there is none, I feel apathetic towards taking action. And so that's what I started with. And I just really want to inspire people to know that, like, we can just take action. And I chose these panelists because I see them as leading the way, and as a couple of them said about being mentors to other people and to the, you can't say younger generation. I don't even want to use the term emerging artists, because I would love all artists to start making work about climate action if you feel called to, but it is very, very rewarding to do so. And if you are feeling climate distress, pour it into your art, and look around and find out who else is doing stuff. You could just tune in to the Big Local, and there's all these amazing artists around us here in Victoria that are doing great stuff. Is there anything you would like to add, Sebi?
And also I'd like to add that it's really easy to get really overwhelmed, but if you just think about what you can do within your locus of control, what actions you can take that you think are effective, even if they're just on a small scale for you, and not try and take on the biggest world problem, it makes you feel really empowered that you can actually do something. You are making a very specific difference, and that's what I've been trying to do. Been really, really fun, like setting all of this up so that all of this magic can happen.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, is, find what your skills are, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel or start something new. You can take your skills and find other people in your community, join community groups, find other artists, your collaborators that you're already doing stuff with. How can you shift your art into something that is about climate action?
It shouldn't feel like you're pushing anything uphill or trying to learn something new, or like...
Which is another point of mine, is I really struggle with part of being the perfect activist. This idea of what your art needs to look like, or what you need to be doing, what you need to be posting. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I haven't even, read the IPCC report, because I find that sort of stuff overwhelming. I know what's in there. I've heard people talk about it, but I don't feel like I have to read all of the science in order to be able to have an opinion or make art about that. I don't write opinion pieces. I do live streams
to
talking
qualify yourself.
Yeah, like the sort of art that I make. And that's not true. I know a lot about fashion, and I make the specific art that I make is about fashion, but I just think that that's part of what holds a lot of people back, is the overwhelming amount of information that is out there. Just bite off in small chunks.
Yeah.
That's part of it as well. And we all don't have to be this perfect activist. You know?
But
sometimes I buy fast fashion. There, I admitted it.
Oh my gosh.
I admitted it. Very rarely, but sometimes I do. I get my underpants from Kmart.
Yeah.
I can't be perfect. And that's not going to stop me making art about sustainable fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got some things in the chat. I just wanted to, Thanks everyone for participating in the chat. It's awesome to have so many people in the room with us, even though we can't see you all.
The chat was
lit.
It was lit.
It was lit, as they say.
The colloquial Generation Z term. Lit.
And also the other thing I want to say is DIY or die. Nothing has to be perfect. Like, this looks like really schmick what we've got going on here. And it's basically all to do with, like, Seb's skills. But also, like, I'm wearing a piece of fast fashion that we've written fast fashion on.
I found this in hard rubbish, and that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, I've got a chair that's hard rubbish as well. Just make crap art, but make it powerful. But, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I just don't want us to be held back by... What are you doing?
I don't know. I look really funny, don't I?
I don't want us all to be held back by having to rely on institutions for funding.
Yeah.
Which is difficult because we should all be paid for our art.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Fizzy Finger says make powerful crap art. Yes.
Yep.
And if we do it as a community, then it is easier. Who wants to make art with me? I don't like doing things on my own. I end up often producing whole events just so alone in a silo, and it's not fun.
Collaborative art is really the best.
Anyway, let's wrap this up. I would love to tell you about what's happening in the rest of the big local on the 7th, which is next Thursday, same time, same Twitch channel. We're going to be showcasing short films.
Yeah, didn't expect that, did you?
I certainly did not. Short films, as was mentioned, we've got Jen and Claire's film, as well as Matt's, and there is a list of more. I haven't actually confirmed them all. And then on the 10th, we have a comedy night called The Joke's on Us.
Whoa, look at that. That's a really big lightning strike of funniness.
And that will be starring Patrick Rehill, Tobias Manderson-Galvin, a video by Alistair Baldwin and Vidya Rajan, and also comedy legend Rod Quantock, who was, has been working in this space for like 20 years. It's making comedy about climate action, basically before anyone else was. And I think it's really important as part of this expo that we've got different generations of artists, so that the next generation of artists coming through can look to who's been in this space for a long time, as I already said before. And then finally, on the 14th, we have a live art spectacular full of completely rubbish art. We will have Sarah Seahorse and Luna Aquatica locked in a room with a bunch of clothing and textile waste, and they will have the duration of the live stream to make something. We'll keep crossing live to them. We will have we have Deep Soulful Sweats. We're not even sure what they're doing yet. Very exciting. Who else we have? We have Izzy Brown doing a live music performance. Me and Sebi.
Yeah, we're not scared of nothing.
We also have Lichen Kelp, who will be doing a live tour of the Seaweed Appreciation Society's latest exhibition. And then probably heaps more crap. So, if anyone's still here, and vote for us in the People's Choice Award.
If you want.
You can go back to our Melbourne Fringe page and you could vote for us, because when you win awards, people pay more attention to you, and we're being our own media now, and we need more attention.
We're being our own media. Bye.
All right, so do you want to play a song as you take us out? Thank you so. Oh, we got credits and everything.
Do you want me to put a credits on in the song that I made for us?
Can we still be on screen with the credits?
I can bring us on. Let's see. Okay, ready? Here's our credits.
Are we back? Can people hear me now?
Okay, now they can hear us, and now I'll play our special song.
All right. Well, this is it. These are all some great people that were a part of this. All of you in the